Hello everyone. Let's jump straight into vendor risks in risk management planning. When we talk about vendor risks, we are talking about the possibility that third parties supplying goods or services may fail to meet their commitments related to cost, schedule, quality, or performance. In very simple words, this means your project is at risk because someone outside your team didn't deliver as expected. You've probably seen this at the office. A vendor promises delivery next week, and next week quietly becomes next month. I've seen strong internal teams struggle simply because a vendor slipped. Stay with me here. When you depend on others, you also inherit their risks. So now that we understand what vendor risks are, the next question is where these risks usually come from. That takes us straight into common sources. Vendor risks usually come from poor vendor capability, unclear contracts, financial instability, or over dependence on a single supplier. In everyday English, this means the vendor either cannot do what they promised or the expectations were never clear. Let's break this down together. I once worked on a project where the vendor said, "Yes, we can" to everything, but had never done similar work before. You can imagine how that ended. You've probably seen this too. Confidence is not the same as capability. Stay with me here. Vendor risk often starts before the contract is signed. So now that we understand the sources, the next step is seeing how vendor risks show up during the project. That brings us into early warning signs. Vendor risks often show up as missed deliveries, quality issues, communication gaps, or repeated excuses. In simple language, this means the vendor keeps falling short, but reasons keep changing. Let's break this down together. If status updates are always vague or delayed, that's a warning sign. I've seen vendors say, "We are almost done" for weeks. You probably experienced this frustration too. Stay with me here. Vendor risks usually whisper before they shout. So now that we understand how these risks appear, the next question is how we identify them early during planning. That takes us into identification techniques. Vendor risks are identified by reviewing vendor history, contract terms, dependencies, and assumptions. In everyday English, this means doing your homework before trusting delivery. Let's break this down together. Has the vendor delivered similar work before? What happens if they miss a deadline? Is there a backup option? I once asked a team what they would do if their main vendor failed, and the answer was, "We hope that won't happen." You've probably seen this kind of optimism. Stay with me here. Hope is not a strategy. So now that we know how to identify vendor risks, the next step is understanding how to manage and reduce them. That brings us into response strategies. Managing vendor risks means setting clear contracts, monitoring performance closely, and preparing alternatives. In simple words, this means don't leave delivery to trust alone. Let's break this down together. Clear milestones, penalties, incentives, and regular reviews keep vendors aligned. I've seen projects recover simply by increasing communication and adding clear checkpoints. You probably experienced how clarity improves behavior. Stay with me here. Vendor risks reduce when expectations are visible. So now that we understand how to manage them, the final step is making sure vendor risks stay under control throughout the project. Vendor risks must be continuously monitored as relationships, workloads, and external conditions change. In everyday English, this means don't assume yesterday's performance guarantees tomorrow's delivery. Vendors may take on new clients, lose staff, or face their own challenges. I've seen successful teams keep vendor risks on the agenda in every major review. That habit prevents surprises and supports faster decisions. When vendor risks are tracked openly, partnerships improve and projects move forward more smoothly. So now that we've walked through what vendor risks are, where they come from, how they appear, how to identify them, and how to manage them, you can clearly see how careful vendor oversight protects the project from delays that are completely out of your direct control. We are going to discuss market risks in details in next chapter.